How has it been for you being able to write this theme, but in a very comedic way to shine a light to it, but through character?
I mean, I think from the get-go, the mission was to make a comedy first and foremost. So, we did a lot of research from the very beginning when the show got picked up to series, talking to teachers, principals, people who, like chief operating officers of entire school districts, and just to get sort of a lay of the land, right? And then we could, once we had all of that information, we could just go and do our thing and make it funny. But first and foremost, we always wanted it to skew more heavily towards a comedy.
So since you actually, the writers and actors, blend over, how does that help you in the writer's room as a more of a collaborative team than maybe other writers' rooms?
Well, it's a double-edged sword because Quinta is the crossover, right? So she is the creator of the show and a fellow executive producer on the show. Basically, we have to start the writers' room really early so that we can have Quinta for as long, and not early in the day. We start at like 10. It's great. But we start like earlier, like in April, so that we can get Quinta in the room with the rest of the staff, because once we go into production, we pretty much lose her, right? So, I mean, that's not to say she's never in there, and she's constantly like reading scripts and giving feedback, looking at cuts and that whole thing. But really, the key was to have her as early as possible and sort of bank as many scripts and ideas and that sort of thing that had her stamp of approval before we went into production. And then it was like smooth sailing.
As a writer, how do you feel when those 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds start improvising your scripted scenes?
Well, I'm fine with it. I feel sorry for our first assistant director who's just looking at their watch saying, oh my God, we lose these kids in about 2 hours. So I'm fine with it because most of the time those kids come up with some pretty incredible stuff.
The show obviously tackles a pretty serious issue, underfunding of education, and sadly our society's ignoring education, especially in inner cities. How is it for you being able to tell this story, obviously in a comedic way, but to have it through character? Did you actually tell a serious drama as well as a comedy?
I think it just starts with us putting story first and seeing what happens. Every time that we do that approach, we're able to fill it in with like the specificity of the real world and what it is like in the lived experience of teachers. And all that just comes from those really rich characters that Quinta was able to come up with and that we as a room have been able to just like take over and keep running and keep adding layers and layers and layers.
Speaking of the room, what makes this writer's room special?
Man, what makes this writer's room special, I think, is the environment of it is so fun. It's like genuinely a healthy work environment, which I think in entertainment and outside of entertainment is a rarity. It's just a lot of people that have fun doing what we do and want to keep every space that we're occupying as writers and for the cast and crew and everyone as positive as possible, because it's a hard job. Like people don't talk about it a lot, but it's a pretty time-intensive job and a very stressful job. A lot of decision making on the fly. So the better you come in feeling, the better you're going to be able to handle those stressors.
So how do you feel? I asked your colleague the same question. How do you feel when the 5-year-olds start improvising on your scripted words?
I mean, 5-year-olds are going to be 5-year-olds. I think that's a good thing about the show is that, we try to have the characters that are children, like, get to be children in the script and in real life. When, kids are acting up and just have a lot of energy, that's just because kids act up and have a lot of energy, and that's not going to change because we're making a television show.